Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Daniel Nagin. I'm Director of the Veterans Legal Clinic at the Legal Services Center of Harvard Law School, and I'm very pleased to see you all here this afternoon. On behalf of the law school, the Law School's Armed Forces Association, and the Veterans Legal Clinic, welcome to a very special event. We're thrilled today to host the third annual Disabled American Veterans Distinguished Speaker Lecture. This series is made possible by the DAV Charitable Service Trust, whose support of the work of our clinic on behalf of veterans we are honored to have, and whose commitment to raising awareness about the needs of the nation's disabled veterans is an example to all. This speaker series, sponsored by DAV, helps shine a spotlight on the challenges we face in meeting the needs of those who have worn the uniform. The goal here today and through this series is not just to inspire discussion, but to inspire action. Action to meet the challenges and to uphold the sacred trust we enter into when we ask men and women to take up arms for the nation. And so to do this, the DAV Distinguished Speaker Series and the generosity of the DAV Charitable Service Trust brings to campus the leading and most important voices on these critical questions. And we are very, very honored today to have with us as our keynote speaker the Honorable Robert Russell, founder of the nation's very first Veterans Treatment Court and a national leader in the Veterans Treatment Court movement. Before introducing Judge Russell, let me say a few words, however, about logistics for today's event. And I also want to introduce a very distinguished guest from DAV who will also provide opening remarks. So first, logistics. The judge's keynote address will conclude just before 1 p.m. And at that point, we'll take a very quick break. And for those who may need to exit to go to class or otherwise, that would be a good opportunity to step out. And then we'll begin with the panel discussion that represents the second segment of today's event with a distinguished group of panelists on veterans treatment courts. That will commence at approximately 1 p.m., and then that panel will conclude just before 2 p.m. So we'll take a quick break right before 1 p.m. To repeat, there is food in the rear of the room and beverages, and we encourage you, if you haven't already, to grab some refreshments. So to open our event today, we are deeply privileged to welcome to the law school Mr. David Gorman, a remarkable man, someone who is both a war hero and an inspiring leader on the home front in addressing the needs of disabled veterans. Mr. Gorman is a combat disabled veteran of the Vietnam War. In 1995, he became executive director of DAV's National Service and Legislative Headquarters. He served in that role until his retirement in 2011. In that role, Mr. Gorman's responsibility included oversight of the DAV National Service, legislative, and voluntary service programs. DAV has 1.3 million members nationwide and over 1,000 chapters. And Mr. Gorman was DAV's principal spokesperson before Congress, the White House, and the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Gorman is one of the nation's foremost experts regarding VA's complex array of services and programs designed to assist veterans and their families. Previously, he held numerous other leadership roles at DAV, including supervisor of DAV's National Appeals Office, assistant national legislative director for medical affairs, and deputy national legislative director. Mr. Gorman entered the Army in 1969. Serving with the 173rd Airborne Brigade, the famed Sky Soldiers of the Vietnam War. During a campaign to secure an area in central Vietnam where U.S. forces suffered extremely high casualties, Mr. Gorman was severely wounded. He was discharged in 1970 and immediately joined the DAV and is a life member of DAV's National Amputation Chapter. So please join me in welcoming this war hero and hero here on the home front for disabled veterans, Mr. David Gorman.
Well, thank you, Dan. Hopefully my remarks won't be as long as Dan's introduction. And the best part of that introduction was that part that I enjoyed the most anyway was the retiree part. I've been retired for about 5 years now and moved from Washington, D.C. to a little slice of paradise in Greenville, South Carolina. Why is DAV here, you may ask, at Harvard University, and what do we have in common? Clearly, we have in common with Harvard the commitment to take care of and to serve disabled veterans and veterans and their families of all eras. I was asked to simply say a little bit about DAV, who we are, what we do, where we are, and then a little bit about what we view as the importance of these events, and especially the program today with Judge Russell. We do support these series. We also, the grant that the Charitable Service Trust from Disabled American Veterans awarded to Harvard helps the legal clinic here to help and assist veterans in various ways through counseling, through representation, and just to provide a place for them to be. And we're very pleased to do that. About DAV, we're soon to be 100 years old, and before anybody asks, I was not one of the founders of DAV 100 years ago. Our principal focus centers around claims assistance to veterans, disabled veterans, and their families. As Dan mentioned, we're about 1.3 million members. All of our members, distinguished from other veterans organizations, are service-disabled, wartime disabled veterans. So we have a pretty distinct group of individuals who are eligible for our membership and who are members of DAV. We have professionally trained national service officers scattered across the country in 62 different offices that provide absolutely free representation at all levels of VA, whether it be through claims benefits, health care, insurance, education, or the like. We also have a program of what we call mobile service offices. They're offices on wheels, and we bring our services and our representation with our national service offices to where veterans are. We've made about 800 stops a year with these 10 mobile service offices. We've seen about 18,000 veterans on the various locations that we go to, and we've stopped at over 105 colleges and universities, realizing that today's younger generation, or today's generation of veterans, not only come back from war and go back to their jobs, but they also pursue, as they well should, higher education. Of the approximately 4 million disabled veterans that the VA pays compensation benefits to for injuries or disabilities incurred in service, DAV represents approximately 1 million of those veterans, a higher percentage than any other veterans organization. Digress a little bit from the claims aspect. We also have, to try to take care of the whole veteran, we have a fleet of transportation vans where we use volunteers to drive vans that DAV has purchased and given to VA. They pick up veterans, bring them from their homes into a VA clinic or hospital to get their treatment and back home again. That program started in earnest about 1987. Since then, we've purchased just shy of 3,000 Ford vans that have taken over 17 million veterans to their clinical appointments and have driven over almost 650 million miles. So DAV, something like Harvard, the legal clinic here, is a one-stop shop for veterans. About today, it's not often, at least in my experience, that one gets to sit in and listen to a pioneer of something. And today we're going to have that opportunity with Judge Russell, who has pioneered the Veterans Treatment Courts and has opened up a system of treatment and assistance and help to veterans where it is absolutely most needed. Today's deployments have been associated often with the development of behavioral issues that could contribute to veterans becoming involved with the legal system, and they certainly have. And because Veterans Treatment Courts are supported by a multidisciplinary team, they can respond effectively to veterans who may be struggling with mental health problems, including PTSD, substance abuse disorders, or TBI, traumatic brain injury, which is said to be the signature condition of this war. They receive supervised treatment rather than being incarcerated. With so many serving and the multiple deployments they experience and other predictable emotional consequences, I think today's presentation and lecture is a crucial one. I would close by saying that DAV is certainly proud to be a contributor to today's program and to Harvard University and to their commitment to taking care of disabled veterans, which I assume most everyone in this room is interested in and involved in today. So again, I know you don't want to hear a lot from me, but it's been a pleasure. And Dan, I appreciate the invitation and look forward to hearing from Judge Russell and the panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gorman. We're honored to have you with us. It is now my privilege to introduce Judge Russell. Mr. Gorman used the term pioneer, and I think that's an apt term to describe Judge Russell, because the law by its very nature is conservative. The law in legal institutions are grounded in tradition. So innovation does not always come easily to the law. And yet today, in our keynote speaker, Judge Russell, we have that rare talent, not only a jurist to imagine innovations, but to make them reality. And he has done so in service of the needs of vulnerable populations, and especially, and most prominently, veterans. So we do have a pioneer with us today. Judge Russell is a graduate of Howard Law School and is currently a judge in the Erie County, New York courts in Buffalo. Judge Russell created, as we discussed, and began presiding over this country's very first Veterans Treatment Court. And it's a hybrid drug court mental health court model for justice-involved veterans. It is a problem-solving court, and we will leave it to Judge Russell to describe the origins of the court and the work of the court, so I won't go into too much detail, other than to say that Judge Russell's innovation in the court has spawned a national movement. And that movement has caused courts to flourish across the country, including right here in the Commonwealth. And it is Judge Russell's leadership and inspiration and guidance and mentoring and willingness to reach out and help so many other communities to undertake what he undertook in Buffalo that has helped pave the way. And for this, he has won numerous awards, including awards of merit from the American Bar Association and other bar associations, from national veterans organizations. He was the recipient of the 2014 White House Advocates for Action Award, presented by the White House Office of National Drug Control Policy. Judge Russell is also the past chairman of the board of directors of the NADCP and the past president of the New York State Association of Drug Treatment Court Professionals. He also serves on the National Advisory Board of the Judges Criminal Justice and Mental Health Leadership Initiative. That's the edited version of his biography, just to be clear, and the number of awards and recognitions and community service in which he's engaged. So in the interest of turning over the proceedings to our distinguished guests, please join me in welcoming Judge Russell.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here and to such a wonderful, lovely institution as Harvard. Yesterday was election day. Today is a new day. And I do thank our men and women who worn the uniform that ensure and protects the rights that we all enjoy. I want to thank, of course, the Harvard Law School Veterans Legal Clinic. Thank you very much, Mr. Nagin, Ms. Gwynn. I want to thank my fellow panelists, my dear judges from the great Commonwealth, who will be on the panel together, and also Major Simone, and to Mr. Gorman. Thank you very much for your service. And ladies and gentlemen, how many veterans do we have in this room? To my veterans, thank you very much for your service. I appreciate it. How many Vietnam veterans do I have? To my Vietnam veterans, thank you and welcome home. And I say that in the spirit of realizing that many of you did not receive those words on your journey back home. But thank you. Give them a hand for my Vietnam veteran. All right, let's talk about Veterans Treatment Court. And I hope you don't mind. I do like to walk and talk. Is that okay? Oh, yeah. I will only do that with your permission. You got it. Maybe that's that old trial lawyer in me where you just want to walk in the could be. All right. Well, part of what I would like to discuss is why Veterans Treatment Court is different, what's different about them, the planning, the operation, and the nature of the men and women who give of themselves to volunteer as veteran mentors, which is totally unique in what we do in our court system and judicial system. For me and our experience, how did it begin for us? And part of my background is I've been presiding over a drug treatment court in my home since 1995 and presides over a mental health treatment court since 2002. And I still preside over those two courts. I give that background because the inspiration involved the veteran I was working with in our mental health treatment court. It was in late 2006. And we have what's called in treatment court a staffing before our court proceedings. And the staffing is where you get together with the prosecution, defense counsel, your coordinators, representative from treatment, and you kind of discuss what's going to transpire in court, either that morning, that afternoon, or during the day. Part of the discussion involved this one gentleman I was going to see. He was approximately 6'4", fairly, big guy. I knew from the staffing that he served in Vietnam. What they indicated is that this individual was engaged in our local treatment provider, mental health treatment provider, for about 4 or 5, maybe 6 months. They indicated that the person would show up, physically be present, but he wasn't really engaged in his treatment program. Engaged in the sense that they thought that they were making headway, that there was significant steps moving forward in that person's recovery and stability in their mental health. So I knew this was something I needed to address when court was to begin. So I called this case of this veteran, and this veteran stood in front of me in a posture like this. And he didn't have the podium here. He was behind the podium, but he stood like this. His eyes was directed at the carpet, did not look at me at all. And I said to him, I said, I got this report. I'm glad to see you're going to your appointments. That's fantastic. But they also don't believe that you're really engaged. You show up, you don't really engage with your counselor, one-on-one counselor, and then in group settings, you don't participate at all. What's going on? And that person's response to me was, huh? I'm like, okay. I would need to deal with this somehow. Well, my project director at the time was a guy by the name of Hank Karowski. And Hank Karowski, Marine Vietnam veteran. And I said, Hank, would you go out in the hallway and speak to this gentleman and find out what's going on? Maybe you can get through to him. Also in the courtroom was a guy by the name of Jack O'Connor. Jack O'Connor worked for our county government in our social services Medicaid healthcare department. And Jack, I knew, also was a Vietnam veteran, 82nd Airborne. I called Jack forward. Jack, would you also go with Hank in the hallway and talk to this person? About 20 minutes later, now I'm continuing calling cases on my mental health court calendar. About 20 minutes or so later, they walk into the courtroom. I tell my court clerk, recall that case for me. When they recalled the case, this person, this veteran, now stood in front of me at this posture. His head was raised. He looked me directly in the eyes, and he stood like this. To my veterans, what posture was he in? He stood at me in front in parade rest. I was like, whoa. And then I said, sir, is there anything you would like to say? He said, Judge, I'm going to try harder. And to me, I don't know about for you, but that experience for me totally took me aback. I asked both Hank and Jack, would you remain after court and let's talk about this? Now, of course, in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I got 2 other vets go out with this vet. What the heck did they do to this guy? Did they threaten him? And, you know, we sat and we talked about it, and they said, you know, Judge, we went out in the hallway, and the first thing we did is, one, establish ourselves as fellow veterans. Jack said, you know, hey, I'm a vet, served in the Army, signed with the 82nd Airborne, and I was located in this part of the country. Hank did the same. Then he asked him, where were you? I heard and understand you're a Vietnam veteran. And they began to discuss about their commonality of being veterans. After that was discussed, they then broached the subject of his health care and his welfare. And they said, we care about you, and the court cares about you. We want things to get stable and healthy for you. We need you to work with us so that can happen. And because of that conversation, that caused this response from that veteran. So, of course, then what the subject became for me, even though we're working in a problem-solving court, whether I see veterans in the drug court or a mental health treatment court, is it something about the relationship and the nature of veterans that we maybe should explore doing something different to afford the best opportunity of our veterans having stability in their life? And if so, what would that look like? For a year, we then began discussing what would and what is the possibilities, and what could we do to afford the best opportunity for our veterans. Part of the conversation was, what if we put veterans that we're seeing in the justice system, in the criminal court system, veterans who are suffering from mental health challenges, dependency on substances, on the same calendar? Is that something that made sense? Is it something about the nature of the culture of military service that it would create a bonding atmosphere, a motivation atmosphere for our veterans? And if we were to do that, we're going to need help of our nation's #1 provider of treatment services for our veterans. We need the VA, don't we? It's interesting, my fellow judges, they'll probably talk about this, and from our experiences, when I presided in drug treatment court and in mental health treatment court, prior to the eventual setting up of a veterans treatment court, the VA did not communicate with us. And most courts around the country, that would be the case. Even though I would have a nice, beautiful document that was created by our state office of substance abuse services, mental health, which would be a document of release of confidential information. You know, those that we see now when we go to see our dentist or our doctor, they say, here's your HIPAA form. Here's your 42 CFR for alcohol substance form, sign the releases. So we would have these documents, have the releases signed. If we were working with a veteran in drug court or mental health court, take it up to the VA, and the VA would be like, that's no good here. It's no good. Sorry, we can't help you. What that then caused was treatment courts around the country who may have been working with veterans likely may have took the veteran or had or required the veterans to go to one of their community treatment providers. That's not to say that's a bad thing. In a number of circumstances, fine. They were getting good health care, but in a number of circumstances, that may not be the case because our VA specializes in working with unique issues involving our veterans. So in some respects, there may have been a disservice. But that was the reality in which we existed in. So Jack O'Connor, the one veteran, served in the 82nd Airborne, went out in the hallway and spoke to this guy. He sat on our local VA hospital advisory board. And Jack said, "Judge, I'm going to see if I can get you an invitation to speak in front of our advisory board." Sure enough, I'm on the next month's calendar to be their speaker. Now, I show up to the advisory board meeting, and it's interesting because it is chaired by our director of our local VA hospital. The other individuals that are part of the advisory board are those from our various service organizations, veteran service organizations, or those who are also maybe active in a VA hospital community. When I'm there, they say, "All right, Judge, you're here. What would you like to talk about?" I said, "Well, we're thinking about possibly setting up a day for veterans that we see in the justice system suffering from dependency on substances, mental health disorder, or a combination of both. I don't know whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. Something we're thinking about. We're looking to get your input, and if we do this, we need your help." So around the room, at this long conference table, all these hands are raised. And I'm like, oh, crap. If they ask me some questions, I don't really have an answer because it's only a thought. And around the room, the people who had their hands raised were veterans. And they said, "Judge, are you serious about doing this?" I said, "Yeah, well, thinking about it." He said, "If you're serious about doing this, I want to volunteer." I said, "Pardon?" "I want to volunteer and help." And around the room, the veterans said they wanted to volunteer and help. So we began meeting monthly for a year to plan this concept of a veterans treatment court, working with our veterans who coming through our criminal courts with a mental health, substance disorder, or a combination of both. We asked our local VA hospital director, "Would you allow one of your federal staff at the VA to come to the court?" I don't know, between you and I, that's a big ask. I mean, think about it. I'm asking the federal government to have a federal employee to come to a local state court. And not just come for one appearance, but weekly. To their credit, and I know it had to go up the ladder, but to their credit, they agreed to. They said, "We will. If you're serious about working with our veterans seen in the justice system, we will allow a staff person to come to your court to be the liaison between the VA healthcare network and the justice system." Another hurdle was we had to get an appropriate confidential release of information. The statutes for HIPAA 42 CFR wasn't sufficient enough because the VA had their own separate statute for confidentiality. To their credit, they worked and set up a standardized form, and then eventually Will Gunn, when he became counsel to General Shinseki as Secretary Shinseki for the VA, they established a uniform form to be used in the justice system for all the courts around the country, to their credit, and I'm grateful for that. But when we think about Veterans Treatment Court, what kind of differs from my drug court or my mental health court is our prior experiences of our veterans that we see. And those prior experiences really can be a tremendous benefit. We're looking now at a group of individuals, men and women who served, who's been trained and has experienced what? Structure, leadership, loyalty, patriotism, camaraderie, teamwork, and self-reliance. How can we tap into that spirit to afford them the best opportunity of success? And that's why we do Veterans Treatment Court. We want to afford the best opportunity for success. Our mission, of course, is not only to have them diverted from our traditional criminal justice system and from the penal system, but to afford them an opportunity to regain stability in their life. We want to do what? Create a new mission. We want to create a new unit for them. Sometimes our men and women, when they return home, they don't have what? A mission. Particularly when I think about some of my younger veterans who served in the most recent conflict in Iraq, Afghanistan, the global war on terror. Their housing was provided for them. Their food was provided for them. And all of a sudden, you return home. And what happens? What do you do? What if you are suffering from some of the invisible wounds of war? So part of Veterans Treatment Court is to create that environment, that atmosphere. We want to provide veterans with not only the appropriate treatment-related services, but we want to be able to assist with the other needs, whether the other needs are residential, housing, employment. Those veterans who would like to return and go back to school. It's unique in the justice system because it's a courtroom entirely of veterans as far as the participants. Veterans, healthcare workers, and services are there physically in the courtroom. That's pretty neat. When the veterans come into the courtroom and all of a sudden I have a representative from the VA healthcare sitting right there. And on regular report back dates, when that veteran says, everything is going fine, Your Honor. And the VA said, well, we haven't seen him. He hasn't shown up to his appointments. Or, Judge, I need to schedule an appointment. Don't worry. Before you leave this courtroom, guess what we're going to do? We're going to have that appointment set for you right now. Because we have the person that can make that appointment sitting right here. Veteran mentors. Men and women who serve and volunteer to be able to assist our veterans getting things on track. It's like having your own Hank and Jack O'Connor who went down the hallway with the one vet. They're there in the courtroom physically to be able to immediately engage that veteran. And when that veteran may say, you don't know what I've been through, and I may not, but guess what? I may have went through my own experiences that you and I can still relate. I had one veteran that even though the plan was him to go into the residential PTSD program operated by our VA, it was about 2 hours away. That veteran stood in front of me. We said, we discussed, well, we are all set now to enter into the PTSD residential program. You all set to go? Yes, sir, Your Honor. Afterwards, he meets with the mentors. I'm not going. Now, of course, he's not going to tell me that. But he tells the volunteer veteran, I'm not going to that program. But guess what? One of the volunteers is a graduate of that program, completed that program. They then brought him into the conversation, and he said, not only are you going, you need to go, But I graduated from that program, and my life has changed from that. And matter of fact, I'm going to help you because I'm going to drive you there. And that volunteer veteran mentor did that. And that veteran is now a graduate of the program. But that's partly how it works, that secret sauce. It is a court that is a hybrid, drug and mental health treatment courts combined. And that was a big question because typically the reason drug courts began in 1989 in Miami. And then some year later in the late 90s was the creation of a mental health treatment court. But they kind of separated out because us who worked in the drug court field, we knew if someone was suffering from a severe mental health disease or disorder, they just didn't fit in our drug court arena, did they? Because sometimes, if I had someone with serious mental health disorder in my drug court, I am potentially, that person is subject to potentially being taken advantage of by my regular drug-dependent offenders, potentially being ridiculed, potentially being laughed at, and it could be slightly disruptive because when I preside over mental health treatment court calendar, my whole staff and my court officers know today is a day we work on de-escalation. Use your prime de-escalation skills. So when my court officers, bailiff working to keep order in the courtroom, when it's mental health treatment court day, they understand that I might have a participant get up, walk to that side of the room, sit down, get up, go over here and sit down. While in any other courtroom, the bailiff be like, sit down, be quiet. But they understand it's different. So the one question for us and the dynamics was, could you put both severe mental health participants and the drug-dependent participant in the same courtroom? We know there was a rationale for separating them for our general population. Could we put them together in and with our veterans? We tried it, and what do you think happened with a veteran that may be experiencing outward symptoms related to their mental health? Do you think they're taken advantage of or laughed at by another veteran? Help me out here. No, exactly. It was something about the beauty of service and the culture of service that another veteran, witnessing another veteran going through symptoms and challenges, they are likely to do what? Come to that veteran's aid to see how they can support him. And that is what Veterans Treatment Court is about. Uniqueness, the array of services. Let's talk a little bit about that. The array of services are catered and veteran Pacific for the most part. You have representatives from our United States Department of Veteran Affairs that are physically present in the courtroom. In addition, we also have, not only from our VA hospital healthcare network present, we have representatives from our vet centers. And these are counselors specifically set up and designed to work with veterans that served in combat, their family, or assisting veterans that may have experienced military sexual trauma. Our representatives from our Department of Labor to assist veterans with employment, to assist veterans with working on their resumes. Because how many veterans, when they leave out of the service, somehow draft the resume that may be fit for whatever the job market that they're pursuing? How do I translate what I've done in the military to serviceable skills in the civilian world? How is that done? Having representatives to help and to assist veterans in that. Representatives from our State Department of Veteran Affairs, veteran service organizations, our DAVs, our VFWs, our AMVETs, American Legions, Vietnam Vets of America, so forth, all represented present in the courtroom, present there as volunteer veteran mentors. VA healthcare worker, they become that liaison, that communication between the healthcare network and the court, providing updates on not only how they're progressing, but in addition, what their treatment plan is. So we can work in the court to help to reinforce the goals of treatment. This is a big piece. Having a representative in the courtroom from the United States Department of Veteran Affairs Benefit Department to assist veterans with benefits that they earn through their service. And having, my veteran service officers being able to do the drafting, do the paperwork to submit to the veteran benefit officer. Now, how neat is that? And my volunteer veteran mentors, they worked out a system with our veteran benefit officer. They look over, slide over the information so they can begin to look where their paperwork is. If there's not, they'll go out in the hallway. The benefit officer, along with our veteran service officer, along with the vet, to see what needs to be done to help them to access benefits that they earn through their service. Veterans that volunteer. It's a big piece. Right here, these are just two of my volunteer veteran mentors. And it's important because we have represented from every branch of service, male, female, different nationalities, and from different eras of service to be able to assist as best as possible our veterans on this road to recovery. But a big part is, how do we get started? What do we do? How does I get this off the ground? Part of the planning is, of course, figuring out who locally needs to sit down and begin this discussion. Who do you have from your local community that you're bringing together? We know we need a representative from the court. We know we need representative prosecution, defense. We know we need a representative from the VA, maybe probation, law enforcement, things of that sort to begin that process for us. Who's your target population? Who do you take into your court? And these are all questions each jurisdiction and my fellow panelists, they'll talk about that they had to go through. How do we identify veterans in the justice system? Do we know? No one comes into the court where you can immediately say, aha, there's a veteran, unless they're potentially wearing what? Maybe a uniform. But outside of that, how do you know? We need to develop a system, don't we? And that's part of this process. And then once you develop a system of identifying, how do you even get the case to your courtroom? These are all the things that every jurisdiction who set up a Veterans Treatment Court goes through. Right now, there's over 300 Veterans Treatment Court in the U.S. There's 100 or several that are still in the planning stages, and each jurisdiction goes through this process. Developing the eligibility criteria, policy considerations. What level of offenses do you take in Veterans Treatment Court? Each jurisdiction goes through this dynamics. Do they need to be a resident of your county when they're seen in your court? Is it a drug-motivated offense, level of addiction, dependency, mental health, things of that sort? And what about these issues that potentially can be touchy? Do you take cases of domestic violence? What about weapon offenses? Now, for our veterans, you've been trained with regards to the handling and the management and the care of your weapon. Is that fair? Some of you would have kept it with you 24 hours out of the day and even have slept with it. Matter of fact, depending on the branch, you may have even given your weapon a name. Now, when you return back to civilian soil, there's an expectation that unless you get licensed, depending on what jurisdiction of the country you may be in, you're not to be in possession of a what? A weapon. So part of the consideration and understanding that is, do you accept weapon offenses in your Veterans Treatment Court? Each jurisdiction goes through that dynamics, something that I want you to kind of just think about. What are some of the special issues? What about the bar fights? What about the fights? So forth. Maybe consider violent offenses. Do you take them? Should you take them? How many of your arrestees have served? A big part is asking the right question. And it's working to change the dynamics in any of your jurisdictions where you're considering Veterans Treatment Court. And that is developing a system that at the time of arrest, law enforcement, our local jails, ask the question as if it was your standard pedigree question. Standard pedigree, your name, your address, telephone number, point of contact, and have you ever served in the United States military, National Guard, or Reserve? And not only do you do it at the time of arrest, the first court appearance, have someone to ask that question. Acquaint our defense bar, our lawyers, when they're engaging the client, for them to become as part of a standard practice to ask that question. Have you served? What is the legal status of someone placed into your court? Big question is, what's going to be the carrot for someone willing to participate? The veteran's going to know or want to ask, right? That you mean to tell me if I'm in your program for a minimum of a year, minimum of 18 months, minimum of 2 years, as I engage in health care, what the deal do I get? And that's something that needs to be worked out, and that's how part of the process that we work through is the case of pre-plea, revocable, and these various legal statuses that can happen. Another issue that comes up and around the country is policy considerations. In your Veterans Treatment Court, will you work with veterans? Does it matter their discharge status? Should it matter? You have honorable discharge. You have less than honorable. You got the big chicken dinner. Doesn't matter. Each jurisdiction goes through those dynamics when they work out. For our community, are we going to accept someone into our Veterans Treatment Court? What process gets the person into your program? What are the barriers? And the operation. For all Veterans Treatment Court, we do follow what we call the 10 key components for Veterans Treatment Court. And part of what we also explore is looking at the strength of our veterans through their service, also incorporating military culture, and we also need to overcome the warrior mentality. But the secret sauce is the men and women who volunteer. Their motto is to leave no one behind. They're a coach, facilitator, advisor, sponsor, and a support. This is a drawing done by one of our graduates of the Veterans Treatment Court program. This individual was in his Vietnam veteran. And let me say this was his first arrest. He had worked for over 30 years. He said, "Judge, I would drink a bottle of vodka a day when I returned home. But I worked." And at the time of this event, he had retired from his job for about 2 years. He said he was sitting at home. He said, since he returned from Vietnam, he never held or picked up a weapon. He said, but there was a rifle in my closet that was passed down through generations as an heirloom. He said on this particular day, he went to his closet, picked up the rifle, and when he picked up the rifle, what happened? Very much so. Had flashbacks, thought he was back in war. Family became alarmed. His wife, fortunately, police entered and used de-escalation skills. We got him the appropriate services at the VA, got the health treatment, and he's doing tremendously well now. And as you can see, he draws fairly well. He drew this picture when he was in rehab. And he brought it to the court and shared it. This is a quick kind of video, give you a flavor.
When the veterans from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan get home, some face tremendous challenges, and that can include run-ins with the law. Well, now in one courtroom in Buffalo, New York, the first of its kind, they're getting help. NBC's Bob Faw has that story.
In Buffalo, New York, one judge has found a unique way to help those who've served their country when they end up on the wrong side of the law.
This might look like any other municipal court, but this is the only one in the country just for veterans.
These individuals have sacrificed for us, and they deserve an extra effort on our part to see what we can do to get them healthy and stabilized.
That's what makes this court program unique. Here, a Veterans Health Administration employee is present during each session, armed with a secure laptop that's connected to the VA's information system.
This judge was different.
I mean, he did something that no other judge ever asked. He looked me in the eyes and he said, how are you doing? What's going on in your life? What can I do to help? What can this court do to help you? And I was like, huh?
Nikki sets up an immediate appointment for health care, immediate mental health counseling, and we have the vet center there. That's the difference.
Each veteran is also assisted by a veteran mentor. These are volunteers who act as sounding boards and guides for defendants.
In this court, veterans helping veterans
do what we can, and everything else is up to you, right?
Under the motto, leaving no one behind.
The motto about leave no veteran behind, you know, because they wouldn't leave me behind. They wouldn't give up on me. They kept me in there. And I'm proud to be around Jack. Jack does a lot for me. He's done a lot for me. You know, he's my friend today, my buddy.
Sounds to me like before you fell between the cracks, and these guys made sure that you were caught.
It's kind of linking everything together. My pain management, along with my mental health, along with my substance abuse, making sure I go to my groups and making sure I get the help that I needed.
Following his latest arrest 3 years ago, Welch was sent to rehab instead of to jail, reunited with his family. He got a job with the Veterans Administration, became a mentor himself in the Veterans Treatment Court, and is now about to graduate from college.
I am responsible, you know, a productive member of society today.
But the court in Buffalo has had 22 veterans graduate from its program, and so far, none have committed new crime.
I want a hug. Thank you for saving my life.
For today, Bob Faw, NBC News, Buffalo.
All right, that gives you a flavor and an idea of some of the things. And my time is up, ladies and gentlemen. But what's embossed on the hallowed grounds of the VA in Washington, D.C. is the words of Abraham Lincoln, to care for him who shall have borne the battle for his widow and his orphans. And I believe that's our responsibility as a country and as citizens toward our veterans. Veterans stood up for us. We need to stand up for them. Justice for Vets is a clearinghouse of a wealth of information. And thank each and every one of you for giving me your time and for your service. Thank you very much.